Well, good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Cunningham Township Board. It's Monday, May 9th, 2022. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu.
Here.
Mr. Evans.
Here.
Miss Hersey.
Here.
Miss Colasetti. Here. Miss Bishop.
Here.
Miss Wilkin.
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry. Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Supervisor Chenoweth.
Present.
Assessor Williams.
Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the April 11th, 2022 meeting. Could I have a motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Any substantive corrections? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay. I would note that you received an email with the updated budget ordinance and Cunningham Town budget, and you should have a paper copy at your desk. Next item is public participation. Seeing none, we'll move on to the committee to verify bills.
Good evening. Welcome to summer. I guess we weren't going to get spring, but there you go. Welcome to Urbana. So this, we have, let's pull it up here. This month we have, whoops, I'm having a hard time seeing it. The total town fund allocation for this month was $54,000, 156 and 70 pennies. And with the general assistance fund, it was 165,744.11. The total was $219,900.81. Just a couple of highlights just from general assistance. We're at 58 current participants, 11 are homeless, 36 males and 22 females. And that our rental assistance is up, so you'll see 24 households were supported with rental assistance this month. Happy to answer any questions you have, and I'll go over a few things in the memo. Go ahead, Mary Alice.
Yes, thank you. I have two questions. The first one is, there's about $19,000 that was from plumbing, so did we have a boiler go out or a furnace go out?
Yeah, so we actually did replacement plumbing and hot water heaters in 3 of the units. We had already done, so we have 4 units with boilers. 1 unit was found to be in critical condition. We knew the boilers were kind of past their useful life. What we did not know is that we were going to have to replace them all in the first year. So we had critical conditions, so we did a replacement, and we went with a high-efficiency boiler hot water heater combo, which is going to save us energy over time. And then we had the others inspected, and there was a strong recommendation that we go ahead. Since we're actually under budget in this fiscal year, I decided it would be prudent for us to use budget from this fiscal year for those boilers. So we now have 4 new boilers, hot water heaters in the 2-bedroom units.
So the $19,000 covers 3 boilers?
Correct.
Okay. My second question, as you mentioned, the amount of money that we're spending in rental assistance greatly increased this month. Do we know roughly how much money we have left for the next 6 weeks, so to speak, of this fiscal year?
Well, essentially, we're far underspent in general assistance, and we're overspent on rental assistance. We're anticipating coming under budget for the assistance budget, but essentially, I anticipated a lot less of a strong economy with a lot more folks on general assistance, but actually, we've seen so many job openings that we've seen a decrease in our general assistance program. We also started our education and employment opportunities track again. And, some folks don't necessarily want to engage in that. It's easier for them to get a job than do work hours at Salt and Light. So we also saw a decrease in that track due to the reopening of that program. So essentially, rental assistance is hefty at this point. I think we're about at $160,000 for the year. Next year I budgeted at 120 because we're anticipating we're going to need to go down to 2 months of assistance. I just don't think we're going to be able to continue to afford 3 months.
And does this fall under the 10% rule where we have to do a budget amendment if we're over 10% in a certain one, or is it because it's part of GA?
So essentially I'm still looking at whether or not I have to do a whole budget amendment or if we can do line item transfers. The 10%, so essentially if you're over budget, and I believe possibly under budget, but especially if you're over budget within an entire fund, over 10%. So if we went over our budget for the entire fund, we would do a full budget and kind of a new budget hearing, a new budget, which we did last year because it was COVID and there were a lot of changes. In fact, there was a lot of income that came in. Line item transfers are used for over or under budget by 10%. At this point, I'm anticipating just a line item transfer ordinance that would come to you in July. But we'll see. I mean, I think that we'll probably be in that position and we will not. At this point, we're on track to essentially expend our budget and not go over at this time. In fact, to come under slightly.
So if I remember correctly, was it 100,000 that we had budgeted this year for rental assistance? Is that right?
I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And then,
But we had budgeted 420,000 for personal allowances for general assistance, and we're way under that. So I basically made a choice. It's kind of like, where is the community need? We have to flow to where the community need is, and it's more in rental assistance for working families than it is in general assistance right now.
and if I remember correctly, I think we have roughly 90 to 95 typical general assistance participants every month. So 54 is
It's low.
about 45% down.
Yeah, it's low. Actually, our disability cases are up, and our employment track cases are very low, historically not low. And again, I think it's because it's not that service jobs are necessarily the best jobs, but it's very easy right now for someone to get a job in this community. There's a few barriers. Homelessness, I would say, is one of the primary barriers, but even that, many of the homeless participants we work with are holding down jobs. So it's kind of rare that we're working with someone who has no employment whatsoever or is, under the $600 a month.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? And let the record show that Mr. Quisenberry has arrived. Is there a motion to approve the town fund and general assistance fund bills?
I'll move approval of the general and the township fund bills for April.
I'll second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by James. Further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. Next up, reports of officers.
So, because we have a budget presentation and that covers a lot of our assistance programs, including some of the data, I'm going to be brief with the supervisor's memo. The primary thing, and I also put it up for the public to see. I like this. I should figure out how to show the supervisor's memo over time. It's a nice treat. So first off, thanks to generous funding from the City of Urbana Arts and Culture Grant and their Urbana Free Library, we had 2 new murals unveiled on both the east and west side of the Township building. You can see those in the memo. There's a ribbon cutting. And those were done by Langston Alston with members of the public, including a number of children who participated in that mural painting over a 2-week period. So we're really excited. If you go by the Township building, you'll see that it just, our goal is to wrap Township in art and gardens, and we're very close to achieving that. I think we just have the south side at this point. Just a couple of other highlights. We are following our the case management in Urbana schools. So we had just launched that recently. very excited about that program. We started strong. We presented to all the school social workers this last month. And we have a caseworker who rotates through every single school. So every week he is in every school at some point. We received 12 referrals in our first 2 weeks. 2 of them were literally homeless. And this is a high number. I mean, and it also indicates that our presence in the school, actually that interface, makes it a lot easier for families to reach us. And we knew that that was the case, and we're really grateful to the Urbana School District for funding that case manager. Just other highlights. We have a partnership with Cricket Wireless in Urbana. And so our participants can be referred to Cricket Wireless for a free smartphone and free, talk, text, and a limited data plan, which cuts off when they hit the data limit. So we're really excited about that. It's in Urbana. It's much easier for us to access. We can send people over there, and they've agreed to staff 2 events per month. So we're trying to, with the garden, improvements, we're trying to get folks out twice a month. Once a month we'll have events, and then once a month we'll have kind of larger community events, and then one of them is just going to be a sign up, and usually that's going to be outside of Lincoln Square Mall. So you'll see that. So that's really exciting. And then we have an event coming up that is in partnership with the Urbana Free Library and Urbana Park District. The Urbana will be there, which is kind of like a big play space. And that's Saturday, May 28th from 12 to 3 o'clock in the Township Garden. There'll be live performances by singer-songwriter Brandon T. Washington, free lunch and drinks, lots of activities for kids. It's really a schools out kind of a celebration. It'll also be a chance for people to pick up plants to start their garden. We'll have container plants for renters, and we'll have the free smartphones and internet help. We also, folks can just drift in, and we can show them how to apply for rental assistance or general assistance or food assistance. So it's a very low-key way for folks to access our office, and we like to host those events. And that right now our events are funded through our street outreach program, or partially funded through our street outreach program and our ESG funding. So I think that's all I'll cover. The rest is in the supervisor's memo, and then I'll leave time for us to really dive into the budget. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Grace.
Thank you. I appreciate the memo, and just had a quick question about the vouchers coming out. And I was just wondering if you have seen or have a sense of when we might see an impact from the new state ruling and about getting out some of these vouchers so they can be used more.
So Grace is referring to the House Bill 2775, which prohibits source of income discrimination. Essentially, that will go into place in January of 2022 if the governor signs, and I'm probably 3 days late in looking that up. So I'm not sure if he signed it, but I signed on to a letter requesting that he do a public signing. When that happens, aggrieved members have to basically speak to the Illinois Department of Human Rights, like the state agency. In Urbana, obviously, we'd encourage people to come to the city of Urbana because I think local service is always, is usually kind of better service than going through the state. And I know that Lily Walton spoke before the city of Champaign to ask them if they would change their local ordinance to remove the loophole that was written in that allows for discrimination based on the use of a Section 8 or a housing choice voucher. And so I guess I would encourage you to reach out to your peers and colleagues across Wright Street, because if there's local enforcement, it's just going to be so much easier. I don't think it really is going to take some time for us to see the impact and luckily Urbana has that local enforcement, and folks should be encouraged to take advantage of that, and I would really encourage Champaign to do the same. I think if we can do that and we can move more vouchers into the community, we actually have more money on the table at the federal level that we can bring more vouchers to our community, and I think there's real interest in that.
James.
I'm curious if that's going to open up some housing opportunity in Champaign that has been not available because of their discriminatory practices.
Yes.
That's great news.
Yes, I think I think so. The issue is that people need to know their rights. And so we do have a postcard campaign. It'll be only focused on Urbana, but I always encourage Andy to do the same. And I know last time I did a postcard, he did a postcard as well. And so in our postcard, we have a Know Your Rights section. The big ones that we see are income discrimination, discrimination against families, discrimination against folks for their student status. Those are what we, and to some degree, criminal conviction. We definitely see that. Yeah, so the other piece we see is folks charging illegal late fees. And in Urbana, thank God, it's capped at 5% of your monthly rent. And we have seen some ledgers in Champaign where people are charging the same amount in late fees in a month as there is in rent. And there's just no way people can get dug out from that situation. So if you do talk to your colleagues at Champaign, that's another area. It's like really just, let's kind of take the edge off of predatory capitalism. It's just like, let's, you know, sure, you can have a late fee. It should be commensurate with the impact of receiving your payment late. And so it should be something that is reasonable within that rather than some kind of outsized, 50%, 100%, even 25% seems really onerous for folks.
Any other questions? Okay. Do we have a report from the assessor's office? No? Okay. Any unfinished business? I don't see any. We'll move on to new business. And the first item of new business is T 2022-05-001, which is an ordinance approving the annual budget and appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2022 to 2023.
Great, so let's dive into kind of the work. I wanted to show you, and I put it on your desk. I sent it an email, and it's here on this big screen. Is essentially tonight is asking you to put the draft budget on file for 30 days. The vote is anticipated for June 13th. You would have about 35 days actually to look it over. I'd strongly encourage you to take a look at it, and please reach out to me or Wayne if you have any specific questions around the budget. I will present on the supervisors and general assistance budget tonight, so you'll have an opportunity to ask questions about that. And we have members of the assessor's office who can answer your questions about the assessor's budget. So essentially, I'm asking you to move the ordinance, not that is in your packet, but the more recent ordinance, which Diane had mentioned. So let's talk a little bit about the budget. This is our lovely new mural. I'll just put it on all our swag. So essentially, I've tried to include in the budget some background information. I've shared some of this with you, and so I will be brief. But essentially, I recently updated all of the local stats in terms of rent burden, intensive kind of like income burden in relation to rent. So looking at 2021 numbers to afford a $686 monthly rent, which is kind of like our area median rent, a person must work 60 hours a week at our minimum wage in Champaign County in Illinois. To be able to afford that. So we're still dealing with a rent affordability issue. Of course, this will help as the minimum wage steps up each year, but we're still seeing that issue. So income is not kept up with rents, and exacerbating this is the seasonal nature of work in Champaign-Urbana, and you've seen this before, but I updated it, so it is the latest from Fred, which shows that we had a huge spike in unemployment. And then it's come down, which is, it's not at its lowest point, but it's definitely come down. That said, it's really a jagged line. So we're about to go into the summer where we see a lot of layoffs as service industry workers and university kind of housing workers and food service workers are laid off for the summer. I don't have updates on the rent burden yet. I think we're still waiting for data to kind of stabilize. But I think it would be, as soon as we have that information, we should take a look at that. But the last we checked pre-COVID is that Urbana, 66, essentially 2/3 of Urbana renters were paying more than 1/3 of their income on rent. This part, I think, I've spent some time in our office really trying to look at SSI cases. We are seeing, and we have seen, a 21% increase in SSI cases in the county in the last decade. And we have not seen an increase in the residents, in the size of the population. So essentially, we have, thousands of people living off of $841 a month. The poverty level is $1,132. So I do not know why the federal government doesn't pay at least the poverty level, which would be like the minimum, bare minimum to survive. It is the case that some states will actually supplement SSI, and it's a policy area I think that we should really consider in Illinois as some supplemental. I have spoken to the legislature that I was invited to speak at a housing subcommittee, and I spoke about this as one of the number one things they could do to reduce housing insecurity. So we see that issue. We do have about 50 disabled Urbana residents awaiting disability determinations, and they're living off of $3,600 a year. So we have the ability in some ways to meet the need, but we lack of housing affordability, and we have some discrimination, which I just spoke to. So we do have a pretty significant increase in vacant rental stock in Champaign County. It's almost doubled. And we have a 13.7% vacancy rate. And this is 2019 numbers. Again, some numbers are still, like the census numbers. I mean, everyone in the homeless services field looks at the census and the HUD numbers, and it's hard to actually deduce what's going on because there was such an undercount, and there was both of the homeless and the general population. So anyway, these are older numbers, but what we have, and so we have the issue of folks circling, and this was January 2022, the number was up to 127. So it's the largest I've ever seen it of folks with housing choice vouchers circling. Now that's not only due to discrimination, it's also because there's more vouchers due to the COVID housing vouchers. Okay, so we have a need for year-round emergency shelter as a stepping stone to permanent housing. It's really important when we invest in emergency housing, we have exit plans so that folks are not living in shelter. Really, the ideal is that someone doesn't spend more than 30 days in shelter, and preferably, it's basically they're rapidly rehoused. So we have folks with disabilities or medical issues who can't be accommodated by existing shelters. And we're having, just especially in the last 6 months, hospitals discharging medically fragile residents to emergency shelter in the streets in ways that it seems to be increasing, and trying to get to the bottom of that. So the story about See You at Home, and they have contracted their services, are still providing those services, and we had a low barrier shelter. That said, it closed April 15th. And there is currently discussion about the city of Champaign Township providing the service next winter, and a tentative vote by the city of Champaign to fund them for 2 years to do low barrier shelter. So that's really good news, and that we're looking for year round, not just winter shelter, although it will probably start this fall. So we won't see shelter during this time, which is really unfortunate for folks with mental health and substance abuse. And this gets to my next piece. I've been doing a lot of research on the impact of homelessness on women and children. I wrote a 50-page paper on it recently. I could share it with you, and I would expect you to read it in its entirety and pass a quiz on it. But it is really alarming, especially the statistics that if you have a woman who is homeless and has a mental health issue, she has a 100% chance of being sexually violated. So we cannot have women with mental health issues on the street. And that's actually the category who are on the street right now with the low barrier shelter closing April 15th. I have not addressed this in the budget. I actually plan to in the final budget. So I just want to say there are a lot of conversations happening around this piece, and I didn't want to put anything concrete in, but a huge need in the community is for women's low barrier shelter, and I believe separate from men because of some of the dynamics of predation that are there. Right now, the low barrier shelter that's planned for the city of Champaign Township to operate would be all genders. It would be an all gender shelter, which honestly could be an option. Maybe there's somebody who that is what they would prefer, and I like the idea instead of it being men only, it would be all gender. But I think we really have to think seriously from a safety perspective about having women's shelter. So I think that's the next conversation, and I don't have a lot yet to say, but I hope to very soon, and I welcome that conversation. So I talk a little bit about the kind of unique needs of women and the LGBTQ population and youth who have to resort to survival sex. 92% of homeless mothers have experienced severe physical or sexual violence, and 43% reporting sexual abuse. So I wanted to share the graphic. You've seen this before, but it's a great way in the budget for the general public to just kind of get a snapshot of all of our assistance programs, and these are numbers from last calendar year. So I go through the various programs. As folks are aware of, general assistance is basically income support. It's our only state mandated program. And I think the piece, essentially numbers go up and down and it's really hard to plan for. So for example, last year we thought we would have a huge number of folks on general assistance based on the year before. And so we budgeted $420,000 for general assistance. And what we found is actually there was a lot greater need for rental assistance to fill particular gaps in the COVID funding. So it's going to bounce up and down. It's somewhat hard to predict. This graph that is on page 8 shows the median cases for the fiscal year. So you can kind of see it bouncing up and down with a recent spike. And then this assistance levels, we track this pretty carefully. The red is rental assistance. Yellow is medical, and if anyone tells you that the Affordable Care Act didn't do anything, I heard that recently, and I just thought, I just want to show you this graph here. Sure, it's definitely got its flaws, especially for working families, and I appreciate that, but we don't have any medical assistance cases, and we're required to provide some level of medical assistance, and we're able to refer all of those needs to Champaign County healthcare consumers. And mostly it's about getting on Medicaid and accessing that, and that has expanded for immigrants to some degree in the state. So what you'll see is the purple section is really rental assistance, and we've definitely seen an increase in rental assistance. Now the bar that you're seeing is actually still COVID, so the next time I'm able to update the bar for fiscal year 22, which is not complete, hopefully I'll have that with the final draft budget, you'll see the assistance cases go down and the rental assistance go up. So bridge to home is really the term that we use for our overall homeless services. So we now provide a continuum of services that starts with street outreach. It includes emergency housing, which also has food assistance and case management inside of that. And that's for families and people with disabilities and those who are not able to stay in a shelter. We do provide up to 3 months of rental assistance to avoid eviction or to move into housing for those at risk of homelessness. And then 12 months of tenant-based rental assistance to move into housing. And those are for literally homeless residents who are referred through centralized intake for the homeless. And then we do intensive housing advocacy, and we are up to 99 households housed. So that was a big jump just in the last couple of months. So we're waiting to have our party when we get to 100 households housed. It's really exciting for us. We also help to furnish new apartments with housewarming gifts, and that helps to support Habitat for Humanity Restore, which I think is moving, and but we'll stay in Champaign, and through Salt and Light, which is Urbana-based business. We also have our new program with Case Manager in Urbana schools, and consider that part of our Bridge to Home program. We're really excited because this last year we became a coordinated entry point. So we can entirely kind of do a vulnerability index kind of assessment with homeless residents, and we can directly place them on the list for all available services in the county. We used to have to go through RPC. That's a burden to them. It's a lot of kind of folks coming through one entry point, and so we as a continuum have decided to go to many entry points. And so See You at Home is developing as an entry point, and we are currently an entry point, and that's going very well. So I talked about these various items. Bridge to Home has kind of, the emergency housing has two components, and you'll see that in the budget. One is our bricks and mortar Bridge to Home properties, which is here on California downtown. We will go up to 8 units by July that are available for families. So we're really excited about that, and we could use them. We do have folks families who sometimes wait. I believe knock on wood, that when we have 8 units for literally homeless families who are known in Urbana schools, as long as there's not an economic downturn, we will actually be able to pretty much house. So the goal is 0 homelessness for literal homeless families, and I think we're close in Urbana, which is very exciting. 8 units, y'all. I mean, we did this together. It's very exciting. And then we have budgeted for 4 hotel units for medically fragile folks, for folks who can't stay in the shelter, folks where it would be inappropriate for them to stay at this location, right? And we will only do 4 if we get a certain amount of ESG funding. Otherwise, we might reduce that to 2 from the levy. So essentially, kind of depends on where that state funding falls. But we are hoping to do some of that, and that helps because if we do have a family who's waiting, at least we have some hotel money that we can use if they're literally homeless to kind of get them out of their car. Okay. So rental assistance, we're expecting, I put in $120,000 for rental assistance this year. That's up from $100,000 last year because we did exceed our budget in rental assistance. As I said, we came under in personal allowances and general assistance. That's a guess. I'm hoping that it's accurate. I think we're going to need to go down to 2 months of rental assistance to be able to stay under budget. So at this point, I'm planning to reduce that program to up to 2 months starting July 1st. Rapid rehousing is where we do the 12 months. That's all ESG funded through the state with COVID dollars. We've asked for some funding to continue that program. Partly the continuum has asked us to continue the program because there's a need. So we'll see how that kind of shakes out. I think at minimum, we will basically wrap up the 12 months of lease support for our existing participants. Whether we take new participants will rely on that additional funding. And then I mentioned the housing advocacy. With social service funding, we have 5 different agencies that focus on food assistance, homeless services, and violence prevention. That's the Channing Murray Foundation to support the Bucket Brigade and Neighbors Helping Neighbors collaboration. They actually run our volunteer program and coordinate our volunteers who reset the shelter, the emergency housing units. And that's really important because if we didn't do that, it would be very expensive to kind of do that reset. So those volunteers kind of leave a gift basket and repopulate and restock those spaces and kind of make sure that the participants clean them quite well, but just make sure that everything's reset. Sola Grata is funded to support the Solidarity Gardens collaboration, and they actually coordinate that for the entire community. And so that ends up producing quite a bit of fresh produce that we're able to distribute to our participants and folks who get our food assistance. And then See You at Home, we supported with the Low Barrier Shelter. Champaign County Healthcare Consumers supports healthcare navigation and support paying for prescriptions and medical equipment. And CU Trauma and Resiliency Initiative, we fund them to pay for trauma-informed care training for our staff and our partners, and also community violence prevention. And they have a program kind of coordinating closely with the schools this summer. So I'm hoping once there's more information about that, I could ask Karen to come back and kind of give you all an update on how that's going. But it will fund that piece. So you may have noticed that we didn't get everything funded July 1, in part because we were kind of ramping up this project and also this program, and also trying to figure out kind of where the need was during the pandemic. So a lot of folks started to be funded in 2020. So CU Trauma and Resiliency Initiative, Healthcare Consumers, and then CU at Home was kind of a temporary, and it started in December 15th. So essentially, I put in enough money to roll those over and to do some extensions. But to get to a balanced budget, I needed to cut that to $70,000. So it's somewhat tricky. I really would like to start filling in the budget with additional grant support. And so you will see, actually, I have funding for one new FTE around grants management and support, who I think will pay for themselves, plus some with the grants income. So talk a little bit about the Angel Donor Fund. We've raised over $250,000 in 2.5 years. So we've gotten an average of $100,000 a year. And it's all it's $20 and $60. Rarely is it over $1,000 that we receive. It's really quite amazing. And we really appreciate our angel donors. 100% of those funds go directly to meet material needs for participants. So just we're luckily in a kind of, we're a government agency, so we don't need to take administrative fee. We're kind of able to manage that within our existing programs, which is a great benefit for all. We have a robust internship program, and so we do 3 semesters of interns, and it's a really important way to boost our capacity. So we do provide stipends for our interns. So highlights, this is the part you've been waiting for the proposed budget. So essentially, we're at about $2.2 million for the overall township budget. Thanks to the referendum and tax increase, we have about $600,000 additional dollars in the general assistance fund. Let's see, we do continue to have a SOAR case manager. We saw a smaller contribution from SSI or SSA reimbursements last year, so I've reduced that to $20,000 for next year, so that'll pay for a portion of that position. I think a lot of that had to do with our ability to access the Social Security Administration office, and we've been working hard to make contacts there, and they now are open. I mean, it's been very difficult to access that office until very recently. All of our income and expenses for our privately fundraised funds are balanced, so essentially we don't go into deficit spending for any of our privately funded funds. We are anticipating some ESG dollars for homeless services, and we got $54,300 in a grant from Urbana School District. And just for ease of accounting, I've asked them to pay that July 1st, since most of that person's time is in the next fiscal year, just so that it doesn't look like we're running a deficit for that position. We're not going to get a whole lot of interest, I don't think. Highlights from the Supervisors Fund. We do have a personnel increase, and we have basically, I offset it with a decrease in administrative costs. So we're basically a wash in terms of those. We continue to see increase in healthcare costs, and I want to do a promotion in that area as well. Legal expenses have really been an issue for us. I did a kind of 10-year projection across all of our line items and legal costs, partly because of the Carl Fund and some of the PTAB cases, but it's just been escalating. So I recently, what I want to do is basically to offer to you any time that you as the town board would like legal support at your meeting, please let me know in advance, and I will make sure it happens, no problem. But I think that about $10,000 a year is just to have legal support. And primarily that legal support is parliamentary support. I'm not a parliamentarian, but I'm basically committing to take a parliamentary procedure course so that I can act that way for you in the meetings if needed. And I've been doing it for a long time. So I felt like that was a place where we could cut. But again, I don't want to take that away from you. If you feel like you need legal support at the meeting, just let me know in advance. And we can have our legal support present. But that's a piece. And then I've asked the assessor to really kind of move the legal budget, the PTAB, under his budget, which he's done largely, and to really manage that carefully. And I'm asking for much more detailed invoices and just really trying to figure out where do we keep going over with that budget. I want to get that budget under control. I have $30,000, which is included as a one-time cost for a new website. Hopefully you understand why that's needed if you look at our current website. But there are a lot of efficiencies if our assistance applications could basically directly feed into our case management software. We are actually retyping and hand entering those assistance documents, and it's really cumbersome. And so I think that instead of me having to add to staff in the future, if I can get this one-time website, it's going to help that piece. It will also help for folks to understand what assistance we have and make it a lot easier to look at on various size screens. I have included $13,000 for one-time accessibility improvements. Our property at Green Street has a lot of issues. I will be reaching out to the city because we have an agreement for parking lot maintenance, so this is not going to really cover that, but it could cover making the garden more accessible. And possibly doing some asphalt repaving in areas that I consider to be dangerous at this point for folks in wheelchairs to navigate. Social service funding we discussed, and then we're holding in reserves any potential Carl and OSF refund. Well, on the supervisor side, I mentioned a FTE who's going to be kind of a more of an grants acquisition and management and handle an increase in assistance processing. So essentially, we need more support to process the level of assistance that we have. And so that person will help to do that. I'm hoping, there's some areas that I'd like to look at CJA funds and Criminal Justice Authority funds. There's family and youth services funds. There's a lot of areas that we could grow into. It's just we don't have the capacity. And certainly I have grants management experience and a lot of writing experience, but I need to bring someone in to support that process. There's a lot of reporting requirements for state. Jan knows about this. And so we can't take on more state funds without that support. We are spending down our ESG CV grant of $310,000, and so some of that you will see in this piece. We currently lack space in the office for meeting one-on-one with program participants. So you're certainly welcome to come visit us. We're very cramped. There are 3 to 4 people in a room. And so I would like, what I put is essentially we're either going to get a portable office space so that we can meet with folks and have some additional office space, or we're going to have architectural plans for an addition. And I really need to, I just put a placeholder in there because I need to have conversations with the city and the library about the future use of that corner. That property at the corner that's owned by the library should be demolished any day now. I think it just isn't demolished because of the rain. So that kind of opens up potential redevelopment opportunities on that corner. And certainly I don't want to add to the building if that is our plan to kind of do something larger. But if that is not the will of, the city or the library, then I think we need to kind of go at it alone. And we're going to have to do something at that space. We're going to do a citywide mailing. We need to replace partially faulty windows in bridge-to-home properties. And so that's really the only major thing, and it's a safety issue, so I've made it the top priority. And then I have $340,000 for personal allowances and general assistance and $120 in rental assistance. So I've kind of rebalanced those. I budgeted for rapid rehousing. That's only if we get some ESG funds, but otherwise it'll be closer to about $20,000. And then I budgeted for 4 hotel rooms for emergency housing, also potentially ESG funded. Some for street outreach, which if it's not ESG funded, I'll just pay for out of this budget, $12,000, and possibly some angel donor funds. And then we have bus passes. I'm going to expand that to all of our Bridge to Home participants. It's a really important part of workforce access. And then our internship program, which I have shrunk the dollars for that program. And I think we will still be, able to support 8 interns per semester. So I want to just give you, the one thing there's 2 major needs. One, which is not outlined here, but I hope to include it in the future because it's more of like a strategic planning piece, is the homeless services for women, single women. And I really think that is only going to happen in partnership with the city and with the county and with our partners in the community. And so I think that's just a deeper conversation we need to look at. The second is we don't have accessible units in the Bridge to Home properties, and the price of that is very costly. And so I do intend to submit a application for ARPA dollars to make at least, to make 2 of those units accessible. They're specifically targeted to people with disabilities and families. And so it becomes really difficult when we don't have roll-in showers and some of the basics around that piece. So I think the good news in all of this is if you look at last year's budget, and what I did, I have a caveat. We had put $700,000 in COVID expenses because at the time we thought we were eligible for additional COVID dollars. Unfortunately, we were not. Even though we did a lot of the COVID assistance this last year, we got $0 out of that fund. We did get the ESG dollars. So I took that out of last year's budget. And so just looking at last year's budget without that never came in, never left. We see an overall decrease from last year's budget in the supervisor's fund of 7%, so that's -7 off the top. Assessor's fund has a modest increase of about 1.5. The town fund budget overall projects a decrease of 2.27. The general assistance budget projects an overall decrease of 5.98 to essentially 6%. And the overall budget is a decrease in expenses from what was budgeted last year of 4.58%. So essentially, what I've done is, it's a balanced budget. I put balanced in quotation marks because I think we're at negative $8,500. We definitely have enough surplus to absorb that, and typically I budget a little bit extra from what we've been coming under budget for years now. So I think we're close, pretty much at a balanced budget. I'd like to keep it there. I don't expect going out for another levy anytime soon, and so we need to kind of work within our means at this point. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the budget, either now or over the next 30 days.
Chris?
Yeah, just a quick question. Thank you for the presentation. Are we able, or have you already sent this to our email account, this document?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I sent it right before the meeting, and
Okay.
so it has all of the documents.
Okay.
And you all have asked for me not to print things out for you. I did because you needed to pass this tonight. But if at any point you do need me to print out something like the budget, I do have a copy of it here if you'd like to print out. I can bring multiple copies and just trying to save on paper, so.
Sharice?
I guess my question, you said $30,000 for a website?
30,000 for website.
Okay, so what does this website do exactly?
The website will be, not only will it talk about our assistance programs, but it'll allow people to apply through our website in a way where we can do approvals on the back end and suck the data into our database without having to hand enter the information, which is, I have interns hand entering information. So we have a very bare bones website right now run by the Township officials of Illinois, and it's just a very flat website, and then we use Google Forms for people to access assistance.
And this would be a one-time fee? It won't need maintenance?
Well, we'll probably have some, I'm hoping to do a WordPress site actually, which is pretty low maintenance. There will be some hosting fee, but the hosting fee we've been paying already through Township officials of Illinois. So will there be a percentage maintenance fee? I'm hoping, I built websites for 15 years, and I don't think it's going to be a high-tech website in that way. If you go to the city of Champaign Township, you will see their website actually is driven by WordPress, and it has a very similar kind of assistance kind of module that we'll be using that is able to move into their visual GA program. So we're kind of modeling, it won't look the same, but we'll be modeling it technologically off the same thing. Usually a website.
Basically have the same software or
Yeah,
whatever.
it's similar. It'd be WordPress, so it's open source software, and it will. So we won't have a software cost. We'll use open source software, and it'll be a one-time fee for basically setting up the technology piece. So a website that we're trying to do, usually this would start at 50 or 60,000. Minimally, 30,000 is really because we're kind of using the City of Champaign Township template as a basis. So we're able to save on quite a bit of cost using that. So it'd be graphic design and user interface and some technology work.
Okay, and the other question I have is about, because I know that the building on the corner is going to be demolished. Okay, so my other question is, were you suggesting that the township purchase that from the library, or lease it from the library, or?
Well, if I could wave my magic wand, which is a game I like to play on a regular basis, I would like to see the city, the library, and the township, and I brought this up to the city and the library, collaborate on a multi-purpose building at that location that's customized to Township's needs and also is a revenue source for the city and the community. But I have not spoken to the library board. I've spoken to the director about this, and I've spoken with Carol Mitten and the mayor, some time ago around this, but it seemed like a kind of far off thing because we didn't know that the building was going to be demolished until recently. So I think this year is the year that we need to decide what's the plan, because we either have to expand on location. I guess we could do a portable temporary option, but I'd like to not rent a portable every year, unless I knew that we had a long-term vision for redevelopment. So with the hotel being redeveloped at that location, I just think it's it's a really kind of prime real estate for us to consider doing something that's much more custom to our needs. So we would probably, my goal would be to retain ownership of the land, and essentially have the township located in a multi-purpose building. That's if I was, Queen of Urbana, which we don't have queens. So, if not, we can go it alone, and we could the money could be used for architectural planning and kind of initial planning work for us to look at an expansion. And we do have space behind our building. There's about 2 car lengths of space where we could expand back, and it would be fine to lose that parking. So, those are kind of 2 options we need to start talking about. Again, this is budget season, so it's all, you do your best in terms of projecting.
Okay. Any other questions? Mary Alice?
Grace had her hand up
Oh,
before
sorry.
me.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Grace.
Awkward. Thank you for the presentation. So I don't have specific questions now. I'll have to dive more into this, but you said that this was sent to us and we'll have a final kind of vote on June 13th. And
That's
so
correct.
review and get in questions before then. And is this will this be posted publicly?
Yes, it's required to be posted by Friday, and I've spoken with the clerk's office. I think the plan is to have it up tomorrow or the next day. But as long as it's posted Friday, and then the clerk's office is working on the notification in the paper, which is our standard. So it will be at the clerk's office, it'll be at the township in paper copy, it will be on the website, the public can review it. I'd strongly encourage town board members to please reach out to me ahead of time. It's not comfortable to get a phone call the day of the vote, because the budget is a big moving piece. Documents, I just really encourage you to look at it sooner rather than later. And I'd be absolutely happy to, share comparables, explain where I got the numbers. Thankfully, our office manager has, played a much greater role in building this budget and, kind of fine tuning it. So I think we have a good sense of, we can explain whatever line item you're interested in.
Thank you. And so tonight is just posting the draft.
Yep, yeah, but I figured I'd give you and the public the substance of it, so it's not just sitting there in obscurity for 30 days. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, to clarify, the action the town board will take tonight is to place this draft budget on file for the next 30-plus days.
Mhm.
Are you ready to move?
No, I have 2 questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So I understand the desire to try and look at administrative costs and be as fiscally responsible as possible. My concern about the legal is that we sometimes don't know, right? So it's hard to predict. So I think it might be worthwhile if the idea is to reduce the amount of legal support specifically at the board meetings, if perhaps that there are times where we can be guaranteed that legal would be here for, I'm just guessing, budget or something. I think that might be helpful because we only have a meeting once a month, so it kind of delays things sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say, I would leave that up to you. You can, legal is to support you and to support me in the meeting. So if you can just let me know in advance, if you want to say, okay, these are the times we would like legal support at the meeting. I've just noticed for years now that basically there's been no question, very, very few questions except parliamentary, the legal support, and it is $250 an hour. And with it being in person, that's even, so I calculated it based on our invoices, and that was a place where I could cut $10,000. There is some legal support in that, so I'm assuming there will be some meetings where you would need legal support. And so I have, we have $10,000 in the supervisor's budget for that.
All right. And I realize you're not the assessor's office, and Wayne isn't here, although there's representatives from that office. So one thing I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention is that in the past, at the beginning of, I would say 2016, 2017, there was a big turnover in staff in the assessor's office. And one of the things that what happened is that the training and the needs were increased at the beginning of that time. So I don't know, I don't have it in front of me right now what the request is for training and travel, but I know that there was discussion in terms of once that stabilized, in terms of the amount of staff, that training budget would be cut. So that would be one thing that I'd be looking at just based on our previous conversations with the budget. So I just wanted to share that.
Training is at $19,500 and travel is at $500.
So I think it was originally, it was doubled. So I think when we had new staff, it went to approximately 20,000, and we talked about bringing it back down to 10,000 after all that staff had been trained.
Yeah, so I think, do you want to speak to, that's not my purview. If you'd like to speak to the training budget and what specific training is anticipated this next year, or have Wayne get back to the town board. Okay. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And I can move to put this budget on publish it, move it to put it on file.
Move to
Okay.
put it on file,
I
please.
will move to put the proposed budget on file for the next 35 days.
A second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Further discussion? And actually, the requirement is 30 days, but okay, 35 will do it. Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans.
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Miss Colasetti. Yes. Miss Bishop,
Yes.
Miss Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes, and to be clear, that's ordinance T 2022-05-001, which is the version that was emailed before the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the next item is for the assessor's office. I pulled up the memos, so if you all want to speak to that, I can trade you.
So the
places.
last item of new business is Resolution T 2022-04-011R, which is a resolution authorizing the Township Assessor to sign an agreement between the Cunningham Township Assessor's Office and CoStar Group. And please introduce yourselves. Thank you.
We're on. All right. Oh, all right. We're on. Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Ivana Awana. I'm here representing Wayne Williams today to talk about the platform CoStar. My name is Ivana Awana, and I'm here to represent Wayne Williams to talk about the platform CoStar today.
And William Harris, Deputy Assessor for the Cunningham Township.
All right. So CoStar is a real estate platform, a platform for real estate management that integrates market data from our area as well as for over 6 million other commercial properties across the country. To us, CoStar would effectively represent a property record card that we did not create. It offers data about the income of commercial real estate properties, and it will offer us unique and accurate details of thousands of properties in our area, as well as comparables that will allow us to create the most fair and equitable assessments with the best possible data. Some of the benefits about using CoStar within our jurisdiction are that it would close the information asymmetry gap between residential, commercial, and industrial properties. This will lessen the burden on residential taxpayers as we are able to more accurately assess commercial and industrial properties. We will be able to find where any potential revenue is being missed out from lowered assessment values, and we will be able to portion that out more appropriately between the three property types and effectively those taxpayers who are the owners. We will also be able to attract newer investors into this area, as stability is something that is oftentimes looked for in markets when creating new commercial or industrial properties. And additionally, when taxpayers go to appeal, professionals that assist them also use this platform, so having data that is exactly what they have will best assist us in our arguments for any appeals that we have to argue against. And then as it comes to cost, the cheapest option is going to be the one which is the longest contract. So for our case, that would be 3 years. There are offers for 1, 2, and 3-year plans. However, the longer your plan is within the contract, the less per month that our office would be paying. So in the past, we have been quoted at approximately $995 a month for access, but currently the rates today are far lower that they are offering. So for a 1-year contract, currently it would be approximately $400 a month. For a 2-year contract, it would be approximately $360 a month. And for a 3-year contract, which is our ultimate aim, it would be approximately $320 a month. Rates are subject to change, subject to increase by CPI each year, but by signing a multi-year contract, it will lock in our stated rate for the duration of the term. So that's why we feel it is best for us to have the longest contract. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Go ahead, Mary Alice.
So, remind me in terms of assessment of commercial properties, I think it's based on sales, basically, whereas sales of the product that you're, like hotels, for example, versus a personal home, which is based on market rate of what you could sell your house at. Is that correct, or is that incorrect?
Could you restate what you were asking? I think I'm confused about the question. I apologize.
So I was under the impression that how we assess, say, a hotel, for example, is different than how we assess a personal house.
The assessment process itself is not different, but the characteristics from which a hotel would be valued and a residential property would be valued would be for different reasons. For example, square footage and bathroom count might be very important to a residential homeowner, but it would be hard to have a comparable between a residential square foot and bathroom amount and a hotel square foot and bathroom amount. So the process is the same, but the characteristics that are most important to assessing may differ depending on the property type.
So how are they currently kind of challenging the assessed rate by looking at the commercial transactions that this would provide us?
Would you have a better answer than that?
Yeah. Can I take this off for a second? Okay, well, in terms of for the commercial valuations, we typically use the cost method, which those cost manuals have to be kind of updated by the state. Typically, the investor or the tax rep that comes to file the appeal uses the income method, which if we don't have the current market cap rates, it can differ in the thousands by maybe we say something's worth 500,000 and it's projected to be worth 900,000 just by that cap rate being different. So this will give us access to those financials that the mortgage companies are using when they're making the transactions, leasing as far as the tenants when they're maybe not picking on Walgreens, but say Walgreens, they're typically 10 to 20 year contracts. So these are things that we don't know who the current owners may be. Maybe the store's doing 10% better, and we're still going off rates from 3 years ago, so we're only adjusting for 3% year after year. This will kind of close that gap, because now the same information you're using to make your decision to buy it as an outside investor, that's the same information we're looking at to make your assessment be fair.
So that was the piece, right, the sales that I was trying to figure out. So there's two methodologies for assessing commercial properties is what I'm hearing you say.
Well,
and we
there are
use
actually
different, okay, there's three, and we use one versus the lawyers of the property use a different one. So how does the
Yes.
Board of Review, if they aren't the same amount that is assessed, how is that resolved?
Well, typically everybody does all three approaches. Two are more favorable in terms of income property. So those are the two which are going to be cost and income, which is income is used by the tax reps or the outside districts. And we're using costs because that's just typically how it's been done since like the 70s. But the Board of Review has the job of reconciling that. So they'll do an income analysis, they'll do a cost analysis, and they'll kind of reconcile those two values and create that kind of bridge. Sometimes it results in a stay of value. Sometimes it results in a reduction of value. We're trying to eliminate the amount of changes after the fact. So them coming in saying it's worth 500,000, it lists in the next 3 months for 1.5 million. We're trying to close a lot of those gaps in terms of valuations.
So does this give you individual properties in terms of, you used the example of Walgreens. Does this give you the amount of transactions and sales that they had at particular Cunningham and just as an example in University, or does it just give you a certain kind of income for a different kind of store?
No, it'll be the stores that are listed with CoStar. So if that Walgreens on Cunningham is one of the active subscribers, then we would have their access to their data.
So that it's not, do we know what proportion of businesses are actually represented in the CoStar database in Urbana?
I will have to get back with you with the answer because I actually remember Ivana asking this question and it just doesn't, like, the answer doesn't stick to my mind, but I can get the answer for you.
Does this have the opportunity for us to decide not to pursue a counter, not countersuit, but counter position to the Board of Review? If we use this data, can we say, oh, well, this looks accurate, so we're going to go with them? Will the data ever be used that way?
No.
No. Okay, so approximately $3,840 per year is what this contract is that right?
If you are referring to the 3-year contract,
I am referring to the 3-year contract,
Then
which was the
yes.
proposal, correct? Okay, thank you.
James?
I'm curious if we have any estimates on using this data, how much value we would capture over that 3-year period, because it looks like about $11,500, and if it's good data and it addresses a lot of gaps, it could really pay for itself very easily. I'm just curious if you guys have done any kind of estimates or projections as to what we'll be able to assess that we're missing right now.
I thought about that myself when we were first looking at the software, and I didn't want to just say, oh, it'll be a third, because it's still, with appeals, you never know the nature of how it'll actually go in terms of when you're defending the value versus also presenting the value. So what I thought about would probably be the best approach in a situation like that is after the first year, we kind of do an analysis and see how much value we were able to capture and what that would in turn do for the city.
Thank you.
Chandra?
Have other townships used this CoStar, and what was their have you talked to other townships about their use, and what was their response?
I know Champaign County is Champaign Township is currently looking into the software as well. DuPage will. Of course, as y'all remember, I'm actually from Georgia, and where I'm from, it's kind of the thing everybody uses, from the commercial tax reps to the commercial appraisers, even on the county level. I mean, I understand it from the cost of being $1,000. That's a lot to absorb monthly for a township. So it wasn't even feasible at that time. But now looking at it from, there was a situation where there was a property that was kind of, we'll say like $3-4 million into the values of what it was selling for. But we went to the Board of Review, and that value wasn't set around that same price. And those were the things that became troubling, because if $1 million in value is missed, that's maybe a chance for $10,000 or $11,000 in revenue, as you were speaking. So that one transaction probably could have been the thing to take care of that 3 years of costs.
Okay. And I have another question, sort of piggybacking off James. If we go for a 3-year and you do a first-year evaluation assessment of, maybe we're not getting our money's worth, is there room to say, this isn't as useful? Have you considered doing a 1 year just as a trial?
From the cost perspective, we've looked at the 1 year, but it just doesn't seem like the most feasible just from the cost perspective.
Grace?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Nice to see you all. So I hear the benefits being potentially recouping that potential lost tax revenue. And I was wondering about the appeals process, if that would also be a reduction in legal fees or staff time, or if that's a part of this or not really financially.
I doubt it's a reduction in staff time, because there's kind of always something to do. But in terms of legal fee, I would probably have to let Wayne answer that question as well.
So I think Wayne is attempting to speak, but I'm not, I don't know if he was set up to do electronic participation. He just texted me to say he was attempting to speak.
Yeah, he said he was here. He just couldn't hear us.
I had another question, if I may, then. I was just wondering then, does this fit within the existing assessor's budget?
Yes, the budget that was presented for us today is including the co-star.
Thank you.
Mary Alice.
I'm just wondering if maybe we should do a happy medium instead of a 1 year or a 3 year. Maybe we should do a 2 year, evaluated after a year. That should give us an opportunity to figure out if this is something that's worthwhile and potentially extend the contract. It's a happy medium. It sounds to me like this would not go, when you said it was presented in the budget, that's for the budget for next fiscal year. So this is not something that would need to be actually even approved today, right? Because the next fiscal year, the first payment would be July 1st. Unless there's a quote, a limit on the quote.
That I would actually also have to refer to Wayne as far as what is the limit on the quote.
And I mean the date. How long is the quote valid?
That I'm not sure.
Jaya.
Is it possible to find out how many of the local properties are in CoStar? Because I think that is an important piece of information in terms of, you know, if there aren't a lot of these properties, commercial properties listed, while I hear that, right, that it could be one big deal and we recoup this expenditure, without having that information, we're kind of trying to make a decision without a full picture of the potential benefit. So is that information that we could get without a contract, like just by like talking to CoStar? Is that information available?
No, we could ask for that. I'm not sure if they would actually provide it, but I will say that is something, if it's requested, we can ask.
Wayne says that the estimate is good for 30 days and goes up May 30th, or expires, I guess, May 30th.
James.
You mentioned that City of Champaign Township is looking at this as well. Have you talked to the company about perhaps there being an economy of scale if we went together on subscribing?
Actually, yes, we tried that last time, and the approach they typically have is it's kind of per user. So in this particular case, even if we would have partnered with them, we would have had to pay for the 3-4 users for our office still. So it would have actually
So
came
it's
out
a
to the same.
seat license
Yes.
model. But if we bought licenses, could we have our people do the lookups for City of Champaign Township and charge them for that service?
I'm not sure that would
Probably
be a
not.
legal
I'm
question.
guessing their contract does not allow that. I was just curious because if the information, if we did it like on the county level, and the county could share it, and there was an economy of scale there, it would be. But if it's a seat license, that doesn't sound possible.
No.
Well, the motion before this board is the agreement. I have a question. Is that the information subscription form? Is that the extent of the agreement, or is there an actual contract? I don't see that in the packet.
There's supposed to be an actual contract. Okay. Because we're trying to decide on the 2-year, 3-year, or the 1 year, we're now, I guess, trying to decide that part of it. Is it going to be the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year?
Well, and the other question is, the resolution refers to an agreement or a contract, and my question is the information subscription form that's included in the packet that lists the price, is that considered the extent of the contract?
No.
Usually we have several multi-page.
Yeah, I was like, usually it's more pages than that. No, I think what they were waiting on to actually get us a contract is for us to decide whether they can only give us one quote. So if we go back as the 3 year, they're going to quote it as the 3 year with the contract. If we quote it as the 2 year, they'll come back with the 2 year as the contract.
Is there a motion?
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
All right, so since we are not approving the contract, right, my suggestion is that we ask for them to write up a 2-year agreement with the caveat that I think Jay makes a very good point. We need to know the number of businesses that are represented. It'll have to come back to the board anyway so that we approve the contract. So given that information, I think we can kind of keep moving this forward. So that's my proposal to the board.
Grace.
Thank you. I don't know if there's a way to possibly do both, since there is only one quote option, just because I think the 3-year one definitely makes more sense, cost-wise, especially coming down from 900 something a month before. It seems like this is a chance to lock in a really good deal if it is something useful that we want or need to have or would have benefit. So I would be interested in that number, maybe even potentially before deciding the year amount if we have to, because I'm confused on, the process here, if we would approve this now and then approve the actual contract once that's drafted.
I don't think we can sign a contract right now. We don't have the contract in front of us.
Yeah.
This is just, this, I mean, I don't think we can sign this. We don't have a contract.
No, we don't.
So I'll move that we send this to the next Cunningham Township meeting, I guess, since we don't have a contract to review.
Do you want to give direction on how many years?
My proposal was 2, but I hear other people have
Jaya?
thoughts.
I would say that we would need that additional information before even making a recommendation. For me, at least, I would like to know how many, of the local businesses are in CoStar. What is the estimated savings from using this? And I understand that there's a lot of variability. That's not easy to pull those numbers, but without knowing even a rough estimate of what the potential benefit could be, I find it very difficult to make a recommendation for, do we pilot this for a year? Do we do the 3 years? Which, in some ways has more savings, but if we're not seeing a return. So at least for me, I think it's difficult. We certainly don't have what we need to be able to pass this resolution.
Sharice?
Okay. William, I guess my question is this. What is, from reading what is said also, and in some ways I agree with Mary Alice and Jaya and Grace about the cost. So my question is this, because it says CoStar quoted at $9.95 a month before. So now we have different quotes of $400, $360, or $320. Are these quotes like the introductory sale price or something to that effect, and that, it's like act now or it goes back to $9.95 a month? I just want to get an idea, because if it's not an act now thing, if it's something that we can, that's not time stamped, then what I'd like to think that maybe, we can do something, instead of doing the 3-year, we could do the 2-year and have some type of analysis as to any recouping revenue and so on and so forth. But also I want to say my understanding is that one of the issues with even trying to go with this software in the first place is because at Board of Appeals, the commercial, the owners have access to this information, and they're using this to say that this is what it is, and we have no way to counter that unless we're on the same, unless we have somewhat of the same thing. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, the last part. What it'll really, I guess, benefit, because it's not just the properties that are listed in the database that'll benefit us. Say we're looking at a bank, and maybe we don't have information on banks, but now we can look at other Big Ten areas and say, well, banks in these areas are typically selling at these particular rates, and we can compare those rates to rates here in Urbana. So it's not just the one that's in the system, it's the comparables we can also use to create the values, because that's where the valuation part comes. You don't adjust the subject, you adjust the comps to look more like the subject.
Point of process, sorry.
Go ahead.
Since Wayne is ill and at home and not able to speak and has a lot of clarification, he would ask that you table it until next month so that he can provide clarification.
I was
It
about
sounds
to
like
s-
you're going in that direction. I
Yes,
just
we're
wanted
headed
to
that
share.
way. I would say compile your questions, send them directly to Wayne so he can get the answers to them, and it can be on the agenda for next month's meeting.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay.
So are we done with?
Yes.
So I kind of made a motion, but I can rescind the motion if that helps.
That would be great.
Okay, I will rescind that motion.
Okay.
So are we going to motion to table it for next?
Yes.
We still need to make that.
That was actually the motion I made. So I'll move resolution number T 2022-04, resolution authorizing the Cunningham Township Assessor to sign a contract with CoStar Group to the next town board meeting, which is on
June 13th.
June 13th.
I'll second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Chandra. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Thank you very much. And with no further business before the town board, this meeting is adjourned.